The following is brought to you in part by a grant from the Foundation for White Well-Being.
Look into this dark, unforgiving glass eye, the mesh of the microphone. Tell it your deepest thoughts, hopes, fears, and desires. We will take these emotions, turn them, and feed them back to you, for we have goals that your feelings will assist. This is how we rule, from the shadows, playing your emotions like puppet strings. We lead you to destinations that we have prepared, and you willingly oblige, thinking these decisions to be your own. When you do as we wish, we reward you, and when you go against us, we punish you. In a million subtle ways, we influence your supposedly free choice. By this method, we rule over a population convinced that they are the masters of their own destiny. Welcome to the Empire of Lies.
Yes, welcome back to the Empire of Lies. I know it's been a month, but Chris had a vacation and we took some time off. We enjoyed some Gulag Cafe, but soldiering on, Chris put on his hazmat suit for his body, for his mind and soul, and waded back into the disgusting Marxist filth of yesteryear to bring you another video, an important video that we've been wanting to make for about the last 6 months, and we finally got around to it. Tonight, before we get into it, though, as you saw in the intro, this is about the disgusting lies that underpin our rotten society that we have today. The Empire of Lies, I have dubbed it. During the course of the stream, we're going to be discussing tonight some things that Chris is going to outline, and this is not like Gulag Cafe that we've done the last few weeks. We are going to talk extensively about some particulars, and then at the end, we will be going over whatever paid chats come in. I will put up the reminder banner towards the end of the 1 hour stream. You can send in short chats on PayPal and Cash App, of course. I would prefer if you send in your paid chats on Entropy, which is the pinned comment you can see in the live chat, as well as the top financial support link in the description wherever you're listening to this live or on replay. And of course, you can send in hyper chats on Odyssey and rants on Rumble. And of course, I would deeply appreciate if you would become a monthly subscriber over on Subscribestar. And you can send paid messages over there. They're called tips. So any way that you can financially support the channel, I would appreciate. And I split the proceeds 50-50 with my friend Chris here. We share the proceeds of this stream with each other. So we have a lot to cover tonight. I'm not going to say anything else. Chris, give us a preface before we get started, and then we'll dig into it.
So if you have had the unfortunate experience of going to university and studying something like politics, you will be told that the way to understand communism is to read Marx. I would strongly disagree. If you want to understand communism, you need to read Lenin. Vladimir Lenin, the leader of the Bolsheviks, the man who engineered, along with Trotsky and a bunch of other people, the overthrow and subsequent massacre of millions of Russians, Christians mainly, sparked the Russian Civil War, and just generally just disgusting piece of trash human being. I just honestly, when researching this, I am just sickened to my core. I have read so much Marxist trash, but this stuff really, really gets me. Millions and millions of people died and suffered horribly as a result of this ideology. And it's back, bros. Many people may be familiar with the idea of race communism. It's been bandied around, but the difference between Marx and Lenin is quite stark. Marx was the visionary, the ideas guy. Lenin was the dude who put the rubber to the road. Lenin was the guy who's like, right, this is what we are actually going to do. No more airy-fairy ideas. This is how many people we're going to kill. These are the people we are going to demonize. This is how it is all going to go down. And he outlined most of this famously in his most famous work, infamous work, The State and Revolution. Now, because the modern conception of race communism is to replace the concept of class, with race, I am going to do a brief summary of the state and revolution. Just FYI, I couldn't stomach reading the whole thing. It really messed with me. So I will be relying on summaries created by Grok, which will basically sort of get the basic gist. If you want to read the entire thing, there is a link in the description, I believe, to a copy that you can get. Be warned, if you know anything about Russian history, it is pretty fucking gruesome stuff. Sorry, shouldn't swear. But honestly, if you cannot drop the occasional F-bomb over the deaths of millions and millions of people, I don't really know, what else. So
it is sick, dark stuff. It's hard for even me to read, and I grew up with Internet 1.0, so
yes. So although many people have pointed out that race has replaced class, if you look at Lenin, if you look at the way that Lenin looked at class and class warfare and revolutionary terror and what should happen to the enemies of the state, a very, very dark picture emerges. Now, obviously, the race communists don't want people to start thinking about the end point of what happens if you mix race with Leninism. But the fact of the matter is that Marx, as I said, is theory. Leninism is about the brute exercise of power, the seizure and exercise of power for its own sake, letting nothing stop you for whatever ends. One of the most notable things about the Bolsheviks is that they lie. They lied all the time. They just said literally anything that would get them into power. This is one of the reasons why, if you follow me on Twitter at malinformedtv, I frequently point out that, in my opinion, Kamala Harris is a Bolshevik because she has that quality. She'll say literally whatever to get into power. Like, if she thought that saying the sky was green would help her achieve power, she would do it. And such people are extremely dangerous.
Same way with the VP Tim Walz. You can see that just recently there was a kerfuffle about him speaking falsehoods directly and openly, as comfortably as you or I would ask about, what's the score on footy last night or something like that. These people just lie and spew falsehoods. It's not second nature to them. It's their primary nature. And that's what makes these people so dangerous. They know what they're doing and they do it anyway, and they do it flagrantly. It is their primary MO is to lie about everything to get what they want.
And I should point out, like, these people are dangerous, but the most dangerous kind of people are those who have the naked desire for power wedded to some kind of transformative ideology. It is one thing to seek naked power in order to, say, enrich yourself, or to elevate your corrupt friends, or to get a lot of women. All of these are essentially small crimes, really, right? There's only so much damage one man can do in the pursuit of money, in the pursuit of women, in the pursuit of fame. But when wedded to a transformative ideology that seeks to remake all of society, the potential deaths are in the millions. There is no real upward limit for how much damage can be done. So always
not just remake society, remake man.
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, you can't remake society without remaking men, and the men who will not be remade, well, I mean, we really just have to get rid of them, don't we? As Lenin would put it. Right. So if we in Smolin, I love this picture. In Smolin.
Oh yeah, right. Sorry.
I love this picture.
I was chuckling at the picture. I forgot the in Smolin, but no, it's
Thank you very much, Grok. I have been using Grok a lot. I'm a big fan. Right. So just to start off, I would like to plug this Substack article from Mystery Grove.
While you're talking about it, just so everyone can have access to it immediately, I'm sharing the link to this in the chat. This is an excellent Substack that breaks down the lead up to and what happened in 1917 in the Russian Revolution. It's a very good Substack.
Yep. Now, the Russian Revolution is an incredibly complicated topic. You could literally read 30 books on it. So a Substack that manages to summarize the sort of main story beats and stuff in about 4 articles is great. Really, really good writing style. And he captures some very, very good points. I touched on this before, but I just want to read this bit in its entirety. One defining feature of the Bolsheviks was a total disregard for the truth in all interactions with everyone else. The Bolsheviks' platform for Russia could be and was anything that would make the Bolsheviks popular at the moment and harm the Bolsheviks' rivals. There was no regard for consistency. They would lie about everything, all the time. For instance, although the Bolsheviks called for the abolition of private land ownership entirely, they publicly adopted the socialist revolutionaries' more popular land policy, which would distribute land to peasants in private plots. They had no intention of implementing this policy. They just knew it was popular and that publicly adopting it would undercut the socialist revolutionaries, who were leftists, but also
And doesn't this sound exactly like our rotten politicians today?
Yes, indeed it does.
Yeah.
So, on to the state and revolution. Now, just a little bit of background. This was essentially Vladimir Lenin's revolutionary manual, and it has been used many times since. It drew many lessons from the French Revolution. Indeed, I think someone in the chat pointed this out. The French Revolution was essentially a sort of proto-communism, communism before communism. And what a surprise, it also involved the brute seizure and exercise of power, the massacring of political enemies, entire groups of politicians lying their asses off, secret societies, intrigue, civil war, famine, and all of the great stuff that you have come to sort of expect from a great story, until it starts happening in your own country, at which point it's not so funny anymore. And just to point this out, I am really quite concerned that this kind of stuff could actually happen in the West. Now, some people might say, oh, Chris, that's, don't be so extreme. That could never happen. Well, that's exactly what the French thought. That's also what the Russians thought. There has never been, this has never happened to a country who seriously thought it was going to happen, because if it did, they would have stopped it. So, just a point there. Okay, so on to summary from Grok. I've just got it up here so you guys can read along, should you wish. A summary of Lenin's The State and Revolution. Written in 1917, it is his most significant work, where he elaborates on Marxist theory concerning the role of the state in society, particularly in the context of revolution and the transition to socialism. 1. The state is a product of class antagonisms. Again, as you are listening to this, replace the word class with race and see what you get. So Lenin defines the state as a product of the irreconcilability between classes and an instrument of class rule, the way that one class rules over the other, in his case, the bourgeoisie ruling over the proletariat, and of course, a means of oppression. He argues that as long as there are classes, there will always be a state, which is inherently an organ of class rule. So this is how you get the idea that all classes must be abolished, and the idea that once classes are abolished, there will be no need for a state. Unfortunately, classes and differences, whether sort of racial or intelligence-based or anything, are a feature of humanity, and there is no way of getting rid of it. So what happens essentially is that the system is replaced by an even more brutal version of the system that preceded it. Lenin describes the capitalist state as a tool of the bourgeoisie to maintain its dominance over the proletariat. He critiques the idea of the state as a neutral arbiter among classes, emphasizing that it serves the interests of the ruling class. So some people might argue, the state is just a neutral force, trying to keep the peace between everyone. Lenin, of course, and this is a common communist thing, saying, no, the state is always biased in the interests of the bourgeoisie, and therefore, until it is eradicated, there can be no freedom. His way to achieve this freedom is the proletarian revolution, in which the proletariat, which, by the way, the communists love to define the proletariat as the factory worker, the strong, the farmer. But in truth, the proletariat was mainly the kind of people that we would recognize now as sort of like brain retards, coders, journalists, people who did a lot of writing. They really weren't actually the peasants and the salt of the earth in many cases. It was only the people who had the ability to read and digest words who could even understand the communist platform. And thus they would lie to the actual poor, to the peasants, to the factory workers, and just tell them whatever it was that they wanted to believe. Oh, yes, you'll get more money. Oh, yes, you'll get more bread. We'll stop the war with Germany.
And since we're showing how this became the anti-white race communism stuff we have today, the anti-white narrative does this same thing. What does it tell the poor, unfortunate blacks in America? What does it tell the non-white immigrants that are flooding my country and your country? It tells them whatever it is that they need to hear to get here, whatever it is they need to be told to behave. And all of that is in service to destroying the modern version of the bourgeoisie, which is the white race, which is us native people to our countries. We are the target. They are the weapon. And so it's bad for them. They're being lied to, just like the poor salt of the earth people back then. The blacks, the minorities, the immigrants, they're being used and lied to, and eventually they're going to feel the sting and they're going to get crushed as well. Like, this anti-white narrative stuff is not just bad for white people. It's the worst for us, but it's bad for everyone being used by this system, except the people at the top, of course, and that's what communism does.
Okay, you're jumping ahead a bit here. I was going to basically make that point in the second bit.
I'm sorry.
It's all right. Okay, so after the proletarian revolution comes the dictatorship of the proletariat, again framed as a society where the workers control the means of production, but in reality is more the Karens and the commissars controlling the means of production. So the dictatorship of the proletariat is not a dictatorship in the modern sense, but rather the rule of the working class over the bourgeoisie. Who decides what's the working class? Well, of course, the commissars do. How very, very convenient.
Sounds like our democracy, Chris.
They will then ruthlessly use the state to suppress exploiters, as they define them, and dismantle capitalist relations. Now, in Russia, this basically meant making it illegal to transact in any way, shape, or form. They basically just outlawed all business for a while. They eventually brought it back under what was known as the New Economic Policy. But for a while, any kind of monetary transaction between people, any kind of barter, any kind of anything was illegal. The only legal way to do any kind of business was you gave stuff to the government and the government gave stuff to you. And of course, the government got to decide exactly how much they would take and exactly how much they would giveth. After this, supposedly, and you can see this gets more and more unhinged the more steps go through this. Lenin posits that once class distinctions are abolished, yeah, you've only got to kill a few million people for that, the need for a state as an instrument of class rule will disappear magically. He envisions the state withering away as society moves towards communism, where administration of things replaces the government of the people. Yeah, how the hell did that work out? Now, stuff about, the Paris Commune, no one cares. And Lenin's description of communism, of course, where he envisions a society where work becomes a necessity of life, distribution is based on need, and the state, having lost its political character, fades into the background. And people still believe this codswallop. I cannot believe after all of these millions of deaths, they have managed to rehabilitate communism. They're like, communism, man, it's not so bad. You learn about it at university. I would swear violently, except this is supposed to be a family stream. But trust me,
thank you. In
my mind, I am extremely. And of course, this
stuff makes me want to scream Fed posts to the heavens as well.
This was both a theoretical work and a practical guide, providing the ideological justification for the Bolshevik seizure of power in 1917. Now, this is very, very important, right? Just seizing power is often not enough. You've got to sort of pre-prepare people, right, for the seizure of power. So you've got like a reason so that you can tell people when you seize power, excuse me, oh, we're doing it for you. We're doing it for the noblest of cause. We don't just want power for ourselves, unaccountable power. Oh, no, no, no. We're really seizing power for you, the little guy, you know, for the workers and all this kind of like other codswallow.
Now, and that's the same kind of trash that comes out of Kamala Harris' mouth today. What does she always talk about? Our democracy, helping the little guy, helping small mom and pop businesses. You know she's lying, but it's the same stuff that Lenin did. Like, what she's doing is the Lenin playbook.
Now, if we were to redefine communist conflict theory using race instead of class, using Lenin's formula from the State and Revolution, this is what we get. We adapt the principles of class struggle and the role of the state into a framework where race becomes the primary axis of conflict and power dynamics. This is how it could be conceptualized. Firstly, the racial dictatorship of the proletariat, right? In this scenario, the oppressed racial groups would take control of the state apparatus to dismantle the structures of racial oppression, similar to how the proletariat would dismantle capitalist structures. I feel like I've heard that before somewhere. You feel like you've heard that?
I think
before?
I have.
Yeah, indeed.
I think I have.
Similarly, from a Leninist point of view, the state is an instrument of race oppression and race domination, where all laws, institutions, and policies are simply designed to maintain the supremacy of one racial group over others. The goal would then be...
Doesn't that sound familiar too?
Yes, it does sound familiar. The goal would then be to transform this state into one that serves the interests of the racially oppressed, however they are defined. This is commonly known, this leads to the idea of the dictatorship of the anti-racists. The withering away...
In anti-racist rhetoric, you'll hear this particular thing be called racial justice. That's what they call it today.
The withering away of the racial state. Wait. Does it have the... Yes, so we have a global racial proletarian revolution. Essentially, a global movement where oppressed racial groups across the world unite against global structures of racial imperialism and colonialism, aiming for a universal racial liberation, which would then, after the dictatorship of the anti-racists was established, lead to the withering away of the racial state. Once racial antagonisms are resolved, which means either everybody is brown or you kill off all the whites, racial hierarchies would be dismantled and racial equality achieved. And thus, the need for a state focused on racial justice would diminish, leading to a society where race no longer determines social, economic, or political status. And of course, because humans are different, both in groups and individuals, and equality cannot ever be maintained, this is an open-ended scheme where you can just keep essentially just destroying and killing your political enemies.
It's sort of like with the economics and the Keynesian nightmare train that we're on, with the line go up. This is line go down forever. As long as this keeps being chased, as long as the anti-white utopia of racial equality is chased, it's a never-ending downward line of everything getting worse. Family life getting worse, fulfillment getting worse, economy getting worse, opportunity getting worse. And it's just, this is a recipe for total civilizational destruction. Chris, I think you froze up. Either I lost internet or Chris is frozen. He's frozen on my screen. Chris, you there, buddy? Uh-oh. I think we might have lost Chris. Either that or I lost internet. F in the chat if you can hear me speaking. I'm typing an F right now. You guys hear me? Okay, all right. You can hear me talking, so I guess it's just him. Oh, and now he's gone.
Right,
Something
I'm back.
happened.
I was about to reset the router.
Okay,
Sorry about
okay.
that. Everyone, hang on a second. Yeah, I think my internet went down. Apologies,
Okay, all
everybody.
right. No problem. No problem. Welcome back. Pick up where you left off. Go ahead.
Now, of course, an important part of this plan is a revolutionary vanguard. This is a group of elites that conspire together and form a vanguard party in order to lead the proletariat, in this conception, essentially the browns or anyone, the anti-whites, organizing and leading the struggle against racial oppression, educating and mobilizing the masses for revolutionary change. And of course, laying the groundwork with a critique of bourgeois racial ideology. This is what we would basically call whiteness now.
Yep.
Just as Lenin criticizes bourgeois ideology as a tool for maintaining class power, a racial conflict theory would critique the dominant racial ideology, i.e., whiteness, as property or inherent superiority, as mechanisms for maintaining racial power. This would then involve deconstructing and challenging cultural, educational, and media narratives that perpetuate racial hierarchies. And of course, Lenin stressed the importance of raising class consciousness in a racial context. This would involve raising racial consciousness, educating people about the historical and systemic nature of racial oppression, how it intersects with economic exploitation. So basically, right, as you can see, this is exactly what is going on at the moment. Now, where may all of this lead? This gets pretty dark pretty quickly. One of the other sort of conspicuous features of the Bolsheviks, much like the French revolutionaries, was the waging of terror campaigns upon their own population. And if you look into a little bit of the literature around the people who were justifying the Red Terror, this is what it looks like. This is from a newspaper that was published at the time called Red Terror. We are not waging war against individual persons. We are exterminating the bourgeoisie as a class. During the investigation, do not look for evidence that the accused acted in deed or word against Soviet power. The first questions that you ought to put are, to what class does he belong? What is his origin? What is his education or profession? And it is these questions that ought to determine the fate of the accused. In this lies the significance and the essence of the Red Terror. So, of course, basically translated into modern race communism, don't look for evidence that the white person acted against black power. Just look basically to what intersectional class he belongs. Is he gay? Is he trans? If not, he is unrepentant and must be eliminated. The Red Terror was described succinctly.
I'd like to pause you there
Sure.
and bring up a thing, something that we say in the GoFree method is you can never be anti-white enough to absolve yourself of white guilt in the anti-white narrative. And going back to the Red Terror thing, you can't go back in your life and unmake how you were born. You can't do that. You can never be anti-white enough to escape white persecution in this anti-white narrative. Just like you could never go back in time and be unrich or unbourgeoisie enough to not be the victim of Red Terror in 1917.
Yeah, exactly. And under Mao, they took this sort of a step further as well. So if you had parents who were kulaks or, capitalists, or, maybe they rented a small house or they owned a small farm, right? Then you were blackened, literally blackened. You were part of the black categories forever. You couldn't change anything about it. This trapping of people in immutable characteristics is a very important part of conflict theory, and is one of the reasons, by the way, why you can change sex, and that is socially acceptable. But changing race is absolutely not. It is seen as abhorrent because race is meant to be the sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Immutable class, the immutable group to which you belong. And once they start squeezing one racial group, they don't want people jumping ship, like Kamala Harris, for example, right? And being like, I'm black now, right? You can't tell me that I'm a colonizer and that, I should nip off and kill myself. I'm black now. I have suffered too, my black brothers and sisters. And this is why you are seeing this. You don't ever see, at least as far as I'm aware, people jumping, at least in modern America, jumping from black to white, because, where is the social utility in that? It's always in the other direction. So this is also by Grigory Zinoyev in 1918. To overcome our enemies, we must have our own socialist militarism. We must carry along with us 90 million out of the 100 million of Soviet Russia's population. As for the rest, we have nothing to say to them. They must be annihilated. Now, again, just replace race with class, and, sort of this could very easily have come out of the more extreme faction of BLM.
You hear the modern anti-whites in government, the race communists in government, talking like this. They call us chuds. They say they don't need us. They say everyone should have a voice except those racist white supremacists that support Trump. That's half the country or more. They don't want us. So you could easily see how today, if push comes to shove, Empress Kamala Harris could say, of the 400 million Americans, we don't need the 200 million white ones that are racist, evil colonizers. They must be annihilated. You could easily see that kind of rhetoric happen and coming out of these people's mouths. Look at how they've talked about white people before, how they talk about Trump supporters, how they talk about Christians, how they talk about anyone under the sun that is to the right of Mao. They talk about us like we are the antithesis, that we are dead weight, baggage that should be cut, that should be thrown overboard like ballast in a sinking ship. That's how they're already talking about us and have been for 15 years. So you think it's that big of a step for them to move to just saying we should be outright killed? I don't think so.
Oh, they're already thinking it.
Yeah.
Like you can absolutely tell they're totally thinking it, man. They're like, oh man, I can't wait until all these like fucking white Trump supporters are like out of here and we finally get to have a utopia. Spoiler alert, it won't be in a utopia. It will just be more ashes and terror and command economy and but these people, they never learn. They never learn. Communism is like societal herpes, right? You never get rid of it entirely. I guess it just keeps coming back. Young at heart. That's exactly how the UK government was speaking during the August riot. Yes, exactly. And this is the point. This is why this rhetoric is very, very scary. And of course, it only works in one way. If you were ever to talk about the lefties in such a fashion, they would gasp and clutch their pearls and be like, "Oh my God, you Nazi!" But they're perfectly happy to do it in the other direction, because in their minds they are the good, the righteous, the compassionate people.
The anti-white journalist can make an article or talk on public television and say we are evil because we are white and we should be removed. But if I say I think that this certain ethnic group or race is evil and harmful to me and should be removed from my country, I can lose my Facebook account. I can lose my job. I can lose my bank account. I will be crushed and basically blacklisted socially. That's how this works.
Yep. It only goes in one direction. Right. So to continue. What is Lennon's perspective about the application of revolutionary terror? Lennon's perspective on revolutionary terror was multifaceted, deeply integrated into his revolutionary strategy, and evolved over time. Here's a synthesis based on his writings and actions. Thank you very much, Grok, because I now don't have to read 10 or 20 of Lennon's books and suffer the brain cancer and nightmares that would go along with it. So, props to AI. So firstly, the tactical use of terror. Lennon saw terror not just as a tool for eliminating the opposition, but as a strategic element in consolidating power during revolutionary times. He advocated for the ruthless extermination of enemies, which he believed was necessary for the success of the revolution. This is evident from his comments on the need for a desperate, bloody war of extermination against the Tsarist regime, indicating that terror was to be used not just against the ruling class, but also against any opposition to the revolutionary cause. So, again, to translate into modern day race communism, it would start against the whites, but then would rapidly move outward to anyone who opposed the regime in any way, shape, or form, including people of color who were like, damn, wait, you were just going to kill all the white people, right? I'm not down with that, right? And they'd be like, you're a race traitor against right?
Mr. Black Man, you're not anti-white enough for the anti-white narrative. You get to be an evil racist Nazi now too. How do you like that?
Yep. And be assured, once they start doing this stuff, a lot of people just shut the hell up, as you can imagine, right? You thought the COVID vaccine was bad. Well, imagine when they just start, hauling thousands and thousands of people away to prison, summary executions, all this kind of other stuff. 2, organized and controlled terror. Lenin emphasized that terror should be organized and controlled by the Revolutionary Party. He criticized undirected or individual acts of terrorism, arguing that they could divert energy from mass organization and agitation. However, when terror was applied systematically by the state apparatus, such as during the Red Terror, it was justified as a means to secure the revolution against the counter-revolutionaries. Now, this is the way this kind of stuff always goes.
Yeah.
The revolutionaries make a bloody move against the people who are not. The counter-revolutionaries fight back. And the fact that they don't just lie down and be like, oh, yes, please come and kill us and take all of our stuff, is then, of course, used as justification for why there must be more terror. There are people resisting the revolutionary. There are counter-revolutionaries among us. Unless you have read accounts from this period in either revolutionary Russia or Maoist China, it is hard to convey how insanely paranoid and bloody these times were, right? Neighbor snitched on neighbor. Everybody spied on everybody else. Often the only way you could get a government job was by snitching on your neighbors, and government jobs were really the only jobs going because the state had disabled the entirety of the rest of the economy.
My father, after my mother and him split up when I was very little, the mom I grew up with was from Eastern Europe. Genetically, I'm not Eastern Europe, but I got a lot of Eastern European influence in my life in my younger years. She fled the Soviet Union. And the horror stories that she told me when I was a little older, it really was the stuff of nightmares. Like families that you would have known for years that lived beside you disappear, like overnight disappear, they're gone. And it was like they never existed. Like someone waved a magic wand and they were gone and no one talked about it. It was like a ghost came in the night and erased them from existence and no one was allowed to speak about it. And everyone was terrified they would be next. And that's how she lived for half her life before she left the Soviet Union. There's other bad stories too, like how awful it was trying to get supplies and how electricity didn't work half the time and everybody was constantly starving and everybody was malnourished and all that. That part to me is secondary to the psychological damage that living underneath this kind of regime does to people. It's just, it's an unthinkable anti-white hell, but it very easily could happen to us. And I think it's happening right now. It's happening to us, like especially in places like London, in places like Southern California. We're seeing this kind of stuff happen already today in our countries in modern era, just 80 years after, or closer to 90 years after this.
Yeah, I don't want to live under this kind of a regime. And you know what they say, those who do not learn lessons from history are either condemned to repeat them or do not know enough history so that when people start coming along shilling these horrible ideas, they cannot resist them. And the fact that you can basically teach Marxism in universities now as like, in fact, it's not even, it's just the default worldview of many, many professors, I think is a very, very bad sign.
Yeah.
Mass mobilization and terror. Lenin's approach to terror was also linked to his broader strategy of mass mobilization. He believed that terror could serve as a tool to mobilize the masses by demonstrating the power of the revolutionary state and by creating a climate of fear among potential dissenters. This was part of his broader tactic of using both the carrot, that is, appeals to the masses, and the stick, terror, to maintain control. So, you basically say, oh, look, we're doing it all for you. Once this is done, sometime in the future, everything will be better. We'll stop the war, we'll stop the civil war. Everyone will have bread. Everything will be rosy. But if you disagree, and this is one of the reasons, of course, why maintaining a sort of climate of crisis is very useful for this kind of rulership. You can always say, we're in a climate of crisis. The counter-revolutionaries are about to overthrow us. There can be no dissent until, this problem is fixed. And this problem, may take decades to solve. The point is basically shut the hell up. Now, importantly, Lenin criticized uncontrolled terror, anarchism, to be specific. This was seen as destabilizing. What he wanted was organized terror, right? Where everyone, sort of like basically they, banded together and they went out and they like arrested or killed people en masse. And I think probably psychologically as well, it was very, very easy, very, very good for determining, sorting the wheat from the chaff, as it were. Those who would not participate in the terror, of course, would be seen as soft and removed. And once people had participated in such acts, they bonded together. He argued that terror should not be an end in itself, but a means to an end controlled by the revolutionary vanguard. This is sort of course, opposite to the idea of anarchism, which is just terror for its own sake. And of course, Lenin often justified the use of terror by referencing historical necessity and the brutalities of the old regime. He argued that the Tsarist regime's own violence justified the revolutionary terror as a response, framing it as a necessary evil in the transition to a socialist state. Now, in modern race communism terms, of course, they would say it was slavery that means that we have to do all of this violence. It's a necessary
slavery and colonizing,
colonialism, right? So, okay. Now, our final thing. How did Lenin define enemies of the regime? I really want to stress this point. For Lenin, everyone who didn't agree was an enemy of the regime, right? And therefore marked for death.
If you want to use the modern race communism anti-white lens on this, what do the anti-whites tell us? There's whiteness in everyone. You got to get the whiteness out of you. It's like everyone is a product and can support white supremacy. Like they even call black people like Judge Thomas. They say that he is just brimming with whiteness and is a white supremacist. That it's like it's the same evil with different words, just 100 years later. The same thing exactly.
Man, Clarence Thomas is so based.
He
I
seems
really like
based.
that guy. He is just so incredibly based. So Lenin's definition of enemies of the regime was broad and encompassed not only those directly associated with the Tsarist government, but also extended to what he considered class enemies or race enemies. All of those whites who kneel down and lick the boot. You're next, right? Like they're not going to be like, oh, he was a good whitey. He participated in the the boot kissing under BLM. No, not under Leninism. So, of course, Lenin explicitly targeted the Tsarist regime, its officials, and anyone who supported or was perceived to support the old order. In modern parlance, this would be Trump, essentially. Anyone who associated with Trump, anyone who supported him, Trump voters, anyone. This included the nobility, bureaucrats, military officers loyal to the Tsar. His criticism of the Tsarist government often highlighted its oppressive measures and its roles in maintaining a system that exploited the working class. Now, where have we heard that before? Of course, maintaining a system that perpetuates whiteness and exploits.
Oh, I don't know. How many hundreds of millions of times have we heard systemic racism in the last 20 years?
Yep. Now, of course, beyond the Tsarist apparatus, there were class enemies, race enemies in the sort of modern parlance. This included the bourgeoisie, landowners, and capitalists. Very broadly defined, by the way. When they're talking like landowners, like the Kulaks, you basically could own like a small plot of land with a couple of cows, and you're a capitalist oppressor. Like these definitions have a way of just sort of spiraling out of control, obviously. He viewed these groups as inherently opposed to the interests of the proletariat because they benefited from the exploitation of labor under capitalism or under whiteness, although capitalism is still a little in vogue. Lenin showed that class enemies were not just economic adversaries, but political ones who could undermine the revolution. Of course, this category, political opponents, included not only those who actively resisted the Bolsheviks, but other socialist factions like the Mensheviks and the socialist revolutionaries. So this is the, you know, the sort of trope of like literally anyone to the right of Mao. This is how they do. You know, you're not left enough. Often the violence against other parts of the left who were not sufficiently radical was even more savage than the violence meted out to the bourgeoisie. Ideological enemies, intellectuals, academics, or anyone promoting ideas contrary to Bolshevik ideology. That's you and me, years, and probably everybody listening.
Yep.
Foreign elements, foreign powers, or their agents within Russia seeking to undermine the revolution, or, you know, anyone they labeled, basically. I mean, the show trials under communism, of course, are legendary. They just basically snatch people off the street, torture the hell out of them, you know, and then basically say, like, look, confess to all of this stuff and we'll kill you quickly, or if you don't, we will kill, imprison, and torture your entire family.
Which they did.
It
was not an empty threat. They did that many times.
In practice, during the Red Terror and subsequent policies, enemies of the regime could be anyone deemed a threat to the consolidation of Bolshevik power. So there's very, very, very vague definition there, by the way. Like,
so I know it's not, I know it doesn't involve torture and death, but sins of the father being the sins of the son type of thing. I am reminded of something in America, NASCAR. I don't remember how long ago it was. It wasn't very long ago, but some famous NASCAR driver guy either said something that was interpreted as racisms or whatever, and it was either the father did it and the son lost his job and his contract, or the other way around, but it was someone did a little racisms according to the anti-white media, and the father or the son of that person ended up losing their contract or losing their job or sponsorship or something. It's like, that's what that reminded me of, because I remember covering that. I think it might have been on Discordant Dragons or on another stream I did a few years ago, but that's what came to mind, is sin of the father, sin of the son thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So in practice, enemies of the regime could be anyone deemed a threat to the consolidation of Bolshevik power, which could basically just mean like speaking, essentially, right? This included former officials of the Tsarist regime, but also peasants resisting collectivization, i.e. the communists stealing all of your stuff, workers striking against Bolshevik policies, so workers, I mean, you know, it's for the workers, but when the workers struck, this is the other thing about the Bolsheviks. When they were trying to undermine the Tsarist regime, they were all for strikes. They organized like general strikes and all this kind of other stuff. But once they were in power, all of a sudden, strikes were verboten. Strikes were undermining the revolution, and they became brutal strike breakers. Again, for any people who think that supporting these people is a good idea, they will turn upon you.
Mm-hmm.
And even factions within the Communist Party itself, if they opposed Lenin's line too vehemently. Right. We still got about 10 minutes left, but that's basically all the stuff that I've got to read.
Well, I'm going to pop open the banner now. If there's nothing else to read, we can leave up the awesome image that you put together with AI here. And I would like to talk a little bit about the GoFree Method and the anti-white narrative. The GoFree Method, of course, is a framework of internal mental defenses against the anti-white mimetic pathogens all around us all the time. And it teaches you a dialectical approach to defeating and disarming those harmful mental weapons aimed at you and the people you care about all the time. This is how the modern battlefield looks. We are not talking about kinetic coming to your door, beating you up, killing you, taking your children away yet. That might happen. But I have a theory that the communists of old, of 90 years ago, that did all of this violent stuff, I believe that the people who are the main source of the anti-white mind cancer today are not like them. They're different. The battlefield is different. The people are different. The people who govern let's call it the anti-white faction today, they're more fox-like. They're more feminine. They're more cowardly. They are scared to get their hands dirty, and I don't think that they want to do it themselves. That's why I think their gulags and their death squads come to you in the form of psychiatric care. Oh, do you have racist thoughts, white man? Then you need to go see a counselor and get on this medication that we make you take, or you don't get to work and feed your family anymore. Oh, we're going to teach your kids that they're transgender or homosexual or hypersexual, or that they don't need no man, or that they should not have kids because of climate change, or that they should only have kids with foreigners to defeat whiteness. This is how they are killing us, not to mention the weapon of mass destruction, which is mass migration. That's what in the GoFree method we call biological white erasure. It's been proven time and time again, regardless of race and ethnicity, when a homogenous group in any country or any city, you bring in a large number of foreigners in a short period of time, in rapid succession, the host population, their rate of childbirth immediately nosedives. That's a lot of reasons. It's not just socioeconomic factors. It's not just number of jobs, price of food and shelter. I think it's a mental, spiritual thing too. If you see your land being given away and your future and identity as an ethnic group being sold and portioned away to foreigners by the people who are supposed to rule over you and protect you, you have no faith in the future. You have no faith in your society or your countrymen. And so why would you want to build a family? It's this depressing mental anti-white war that weighs us down and is destroying us. That type of killing, of genocide, is the modern, feminine, cowardly Fox version, where this old school line them up against the wall, throw them in the gulags type of communism is the lion version of the anti-white crap. And that's why I think today we are being gulagged. We are being put against the wall. We are being shot. We are being starved, but it's in the mental, spiritual way, via social media, via socioeconomics, via all of the anti-white pathogens that come at us through video games and comic books and out of the mouths of politicians. So this is happening to us today. It's just in a different form that's non-kinetic for the most part. So Chris, we talked about that offline, and you thought that was a good take. So I wanted the people listening to hear that tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it should be noted that there was a ton of that also in the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
They were very, very keen on using psychiatry to silence their opponents. Sort of, under Stalin, when it sort of moved into a sort of more stable phase, and they stopped using sort of large revolutionary terror, and they just sort of more focus on individual people. They love dragging people off to psychiatric hospitals for their own good. The sort of classic diagnosis was sluggish schizophrenia, which you could get diagnosed as having because you thought the revolution wasn't a great idea. Shock, horror. Who would have thought such?
And we actually covered that in an earlier episode of Empire of Lies.
Yes.
Those of you Empire of Lies veterans will remember that.
Yep. So super chats. Do we have any super chats?
We have a couple. I will refresh and make sure we're not missing anyone. So I'll go ahead and do that today, or do that right now.
I'll just sum up then.
Sure, go ahead.
Communism and the sort of mental framing around it, the ideological framing, the language conflict theory never really dies. Even in ethnically homogenous societies, you can use class as a wedge to beat people with, to sow dissatisfaction. And of course, always remember that from the communist point of view, making conditions worse was actually a good thing. The communists never wanted to help the people that they so supposedly represented, because once people got content, they lost their revolutionary energy. This was a big criticism of countries like the UK, like the United States, when the middle class was happy. Lennon's prescription was to crush the middle class under the twin millstones of taxation and inflation, to make everyone poor and thus destroy the middle class, which the middle class and social mobility are actually great stabilizing influences in society, because a lot of people, they're quite happy to be middle class, right? Once you destroy the middle class and everyone is either incredibly poor or incredibly wealthy, this generates conflict, which is useful to the revolution. So do not believe their lies. they have no interest in helping the people that they spend all of their time whining and complaining on the behalf of, because if they ever lost their grievance, they would lose the motivation to the revolution, and it is always the revolution that is on their mind.
Yep. I have no closing statements other than what I shared earlier about we are living through this destructive, murderous, genocidal revolution. It is happening. It's just not kinetic with tanks and NKVD. It's being done to us by HR commissars and blue-haired school ladies. That's how it's being done to us. And don't forget WEF, ESG scores, etc., etc., etc. So let's go ahead and embiggen, and we will do the paid chats and get out of here. All right. First up, over on PayPal, we have, okay, nothing from Cash App, so we'll start with PayPal. Over on PayPal, we have our good friend Dawn. Dawn, who is in the chat, like always. Hello, Dawn. Thank you very much. She just sends a bunch of fruit and vegetable emojis with 2 white hearts, one for each of us, and she does so with $20 US. Thank you so much, Dawn.
Thank you, Dawn. I really appreciate it. I see you on Twitter as well. It's nice to see people from the show.
Yeah.
Sending me stuff on Twitter. It's great.
Thank you so much, Dawn. That was on PayPal. Over on Subscribestar, we don't have anything tonight. No rants on Rumble and no hyper chats on Odyssey, but we do have 2 things over on Entropy. Let me refresh and make sure there's not a third. The stream over on Entropy, for whatever reason, I don't know why it dips out sometimes. About halfway through, it dipped out and I had to refresh it, but I did get both of the Entropies. The first one is from Sheev Palpacringe. Great name. Longtime buddy of mine over in the AA cluster. Glad to have you and your dollars here. Sheev Palpacringe for $3 US says, I cannot wait for Comrade Lambley to implement race communism here in the UK.
Comrade Lammy. Yes. I'm looking forward to our baldy-headed commissar.
Thank you very much, Sheev Palpacringe.
Yeah,
also
Sheev.
over on Entropy from Simon JJ, longtime friend and supporter of the channel. Thank you so much for all the dollars you've contributed over the years. And tonight contributes 20 more US and says, fantastic presentation, Newsfist. Great work yet again from you chaps. Well, thank you, Simon.
Thanks, Simon. Appreciate it, mate. Great to see you.
And I just refreshed again, and that's it. We are clear to say our goodbyes. Again, I know that economic hardship has fallen on all of us, and I will do a quick reminder. My camping trip is, of course, canceled because most people couldn't come anyway this year because of financial reasons. There was only like 4 or 5 people that said that they could come. And with the recent horrible hurricane that came through here in Appalachia, there was some flood damage, and the campsite, the campgrounds kind of look ugly right now. And with how bad travel is, and with a major interstate bridge near here being out, I just canceled the camping trip. So no October camping trip this year, guys. But we will have a big white positive GoFree picnic early in April this coming year. So knock on wood, that will get to happen. So anyway, good night, everyone. I encourage you all to come back Monday night to check out Discordant Dragons. And of course, Monday night and Thursday night, you can check out the Happening TV on Chris's channel. And of course, same time slot as Monday night for Discordant Dragons is this stream series here. We'll be back with more for you guys next week. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and follow me on Twitter at Malinformed TV. I'm increasingly spending more time on Twitter. It's sure. Lovely to see, like, you know, friendly faces and stuff. Thank you all the people who donated. I really appreciate it. It means so much.
And thank you all. I see many of you guys on social media sharing the links and talking about the work that we do. Thank you very much. It is very difficult for quality pro-white content like this to grow. And I really do appreciate all that you guys have done to help us grow. It means a lot to both of us. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody. We'll see you next week. God bless. It's not ending. Why is it not ending? I've clicked it 6 times.